morning, look, prepare yourself a bit. What for? Prepare yourself for this. Prepare yourself today to take something home with you in your heart. Prepare yourself today to take something home in your heart. Just one thing. Just one thing. Lord, I'm going to catch something and take it home in my heart today, because what you take home is the thing that's going to change you. And the reason why we come here is to be changed by God, the Holy Spirit, who just brings things and makes them real to us. Information is great, but we want a revelation, because the revelation is the change agent. So I want you to think of God. Anybody ever seen the Cave Hill?
Yes.
Anybody ever walk up the Cave Hill?
Yep.
Anybody ever think about walking up the Cave Hill? Anybody drive past and see it from a distance and see Napoleon's nose? But one way or the other, you and I have seen it. We've been driving past it or looking at it. And it just sort of got me thinking, because the Cave Hill boasts 5 caves. And there's always stories, but I haven't looked them up because I didn't want to bore you. But I'm sure that you've looked and at times thought, wow, isn't that just lovely the way it sits? Or maybe you've heard it called the Sleeping Man or whatever in the rolling hills. But it really is a bit of beauty, and the walkways up to it are beautiful too. But can you imagine living in a spiritual cave? I mean, a place where there isn't much light, or maybe hiding in a cave, or maybe you understand when we talk about caves, you think of the cave of loneliness, or the cave of depression, or the cave of isolation, or, there's lots of different things we could say about caves. And I was just sort of thinking, the truth is in life that we all get cave time. We all get cave time in our life. Every one of us, nobody can get through without that. Some of us actually spend more time in caves than others. If you're of the male species, your wife, if you're married, your wife will say, way back to your cave. We've all heard that one, haven't we? And you start to realize that, hey, there's lots of different types of caves. I'm not just talking about physical ones, I'm talking about spiritual ones as well. This morning, I want to talk to you about hope in every cave. Hope in every cave. Because I believe that there is hope in every single cave, no matter what you can look at. There's a hope that lurks in the cave that you may frequent or dwell, or someone that you know is there, but there's hope in every cave. I suppose in many ways we're all sort of in a cave of sorts. And when we're in a cave, we're always wanting the light. If you're a Christian, Lord, I want the light of your grace in this cave. I want to be able to see. I want to be able to know something about you in this cave. And here, is anybody mature as a Christian here? Please don't put your hand up, because we'll start to laugh. I'm not putting my hand up, or you start to laugh. But sometimes, when you think about it for a bit, when you start the journey on the road to maturity, it feels like a cave. You realize there's lots of different things about caves. When you read the Bible, they're full of caves. There's one there I'm just looking at. I'm not really, but Joseph ended up in a cave of sorts. His whole life was that way. Or maybe they said he had a prison. It would help you understand his prison was a cave. And then you think about Moses. Well, Moses had the cave called the desert. And he lived there and frequented there. And then you had Daniel. He was in a den that was really a cave. And you realize it's a closed in. Or Paul, who went to jail, and that was actually a cave, a hole in the ground. But I want you to get the idea. And you're thinking, wow, even Jesus had a wilderness. It was a cave, trapped, closed in. Whatever way you want to look at it. But caves are part of life. Spiritual caves are part of life. And the beauty of this is everybody gets to partake in a cave somewhere in your world. And I want to say, somewhere in the cave that you've visited, been to, or frightened to go back to, I really believe with all my heart there's hope lurking in every cave. Yes. There's hope that's in that cave. And sometimes we don't see it, sometimes we don't understand it, but it's there. If I was to keep painting the picture of a cave, I would say this: the cave is a place of death. Oh, Lewis, that's not nice. Well, I know that, but it's the truth. The cave is a place of death. And what I mean by that is the cave is a place where, if you're a believer, if you're a Christian, where you die to your strength. Where you realize that no matter what you do, no matter how you struggle, no matter what book you read, that includes the Bible, no matter whether you pray in tongues or whatever you do, it doesn't change the cave. You get stripped of your strength. I know that, and I've shared a while back when I was in hospital, that was the thing that I learned coming out of the cave for me in that time of stress, that the Lord spoke from my dark cave and says, now you know, Lewis, everything about your life is totally dependent on grace. Because there's no help, only me lurking or being in this cave that can actually rescue you. The cave would be a place of testing. We love that. Testing of your moral fiber, you know. In a cave, maturity really gets tested or looked at. Or should I say, maturity gets revealed. All of a sudden you work out, I am mature or I am not mature. But it gets revealed. All of a sudden you see, hey, look, here is my heart that's being exposed. And all of a sudden it's a great leveler of who you are or who I am on our own when we're talking with him. If you put a person in a cave of distress or discouragement or the cave of doubt, the true character all of a sudden shows up. Isn't that right? You know, because you see it, it's just you're there and you realize, wow, this is a cave. This is who I really am. This is, you know, just keep it yourself. Don't tell us all, you know, because the truth is, you are no better than us and I'm no better than you. We all live in cave. We're all cavemen. And all that sort of thing. I should have brought one of those big doofers. Club, thank you, Keith, a big club. But see, if I say club, I think sandwich, but it doesn't work for me. But I get what you're saying. But somewhere a character shows up, and Moses has these words that he wants to share with us out of Deuteronomy. And when you hear what he says in Deuteronomy 8, and if you think of these guys, the whole of Israel are walking through the desert, well, they're about to. He's coming down from the mountain at this stage. In verse 2, this is what he says to all these Hebrews who escaped slavery. And you shall remember. He's saying remember. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you. These 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. Every situation, every problem, every event, every hope, every blessing, all of a sudden you start to realize when you look at this, God says, I shaped all that for you to see whether you'll remember. To see whether you'll remember the Lord your God. And, you know, whether it's blessing or whether it's a real tough time, he says, I want to know, will you remember? And all of a sudden you realize, wow, in my cave, God was looking, God was watching. God was there. The cave is another thing, it's a place of separation. The cave is a place of separation. But what do you mean it's a place of separation? Well, being separated, you're just stripped of every misplaced dependency. Everything that you depend on, everything that I depend on, when you get into a cave and when it's low, when it's dark and the lights are all turned down, and it's great when you have that sort of dimmer in your cave. But if you're in that type of cave, you realize you get stripped of everything that you put your hope in, your trust in. Everything all of a sudden starts to fall by the wayside. That's what caves are like. Moses goes on and explains to the children, what do you hear? And he humbled you, Deuteronomy 8 and 3. And he, God, humbled you and let you hunger. And he fed you with manna. I like that. He says, I let you get hungry, then I fed you with the food that I knew that was good for you. Which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make known to you that man does not live by bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. Isn't that great to understand if you're in a cave today that you're thinking, do you know what? This is dark, but God is teaching me, showing me I'm separated on to know that God is here to feed and nourish me. If we wrote a list of the things that we're trying to nourish ourselves from, I think we would be righteously humbled that we're being so daft as Christians, what we're trying to fit in, to make ourselves supported or feel better or look good or whatever it would be. I think something would change in our minds. I want today to look at a couple of Old Testament people, just thinking about the concept of caves, and one of them is David, King David, and the other one is Jeremiah, the prophet. And probably if I just look at a synopsis at the minute of King David's life before he went to live in a cave, because he did. In 1 Samuel 16, we find that he's being anointed. The prophet Samuel comes to anoint him, and you think, well, you know, it's an interesting story. His daddy gets his 7 brothers out and said, is this going to be the king? As he's speaking to the prophet, and says, no, have you any more sons? He said, well, I got one more out in the field. It's a bit like when you realize that David's getting anointing, you realize, hey, don't judge a book by its cover. Because daddy, who was a Jesse by name and a Jesse by nature, thought, well, David can't lead anything. And yet God had chosen David to lead in 1 Samuel 16. It's interesting because everybody sort of scrambles, I want to be anointed by God. Isn't that right? Isn't that the way we think sometimes? And yet we find out when you get anointed, when you become God's choice like David did, you always suffer. But you always get redeemed. So there's hope in it. You see, somewhere if we believe that the Bible is just about, you know, everything that we give to God, we soon start to work out, well, that's all you'll see if you believe that first and foremost, but you'll soon start to work out that's only part of it, what we give to God. Primarily, it's about what God gives to us. And I love that song we were just singing about God's goodness and His beauty, and I was just saying, Lord, I just need to thank you for that. I've started listening to things I wanted to thank Him for, you know, during this song. And I hope you're like that. You start to list things and speak to Him. Anyway, still in chapter 16, David dwells in the palace, and then in chapter 17, he goes and fights a giant. Anybody know his name? You got it in one. Goliath. One person got it. That was really good. Well done. We'll start a team. In chapter 18, he meets his best friend. Anybody know who he was? Jonathan. I'm going to answer all the questions for him. And then you need to beat him to the question. But he meets his best friend, Jonathan, you know, and there's a period of David's life where he's very popular. He was full of power and he was full of prestige, and everything was going kind of well for him. And then he wins his wife, Michal, or Michal, or whatever way you want to pronounce it. And by and large, his life was on the road to success, and everybody would have been happy going that way if you had been him. Then we get to chapter 19, and everything changes because the king who he was called to serve in the palace was King who? Oh, well done, Keith. Got there before you. Na. Well done. Thank you for being so gracious, Raymond, and letting us get one. But he starts to find that Saul turns on him. He gets exiled from the palace. And his wife comes to chapter 20, and all of a sudden he's released from being the leader of the army. He loses all his fame. Everything has just been stripped bit by bit by bit. He sees his best friend Jonathan for the last time, and he loses him too. And then in chapter 21, he loses his relationship, or loses Samuel the prophet, who was directing him and encouraging him all his days, and it's all gone. He becomes a man on the run. He becomes a fugitive from the law or the king. And he lives in exile for 8 years or thereabouts. David now was at the place where he had went to the top, and now he was at the bottom. David was at the place of death. David was running from King Saul. And then he started to run from another king, Achish, the Philistine king of Gath. And that king of Gath, Gath's the place where, guess what? That's where Goliath came from. And he finds that everyone, his enemies are his enemies and his friends are his enemies. And it must have been a horrible place for him to be. Really here in Psalm 56 verse 9, David starts to write. Really here. Psalm 57, did I say? I'll go to 56 instead then. Okay. Is that the one I want to look at? Yeah, it is. Okay, here we go. Then my enemies, David writes, will turn back in the day when I call. I think he's having a real mess, bad day. Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know. What do you know, David? This I know, that God is for me. That God is for me. In God, whose word I praise, in the Lord, whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid what man can do to me. And I'm wondering sometimes what you know and what I know, especially if you're in a cave a bit like this, and it's very dark, and we look at it and we realize that, hey, this guy is really, really trapped, he's caught. But he's told us some things, he's telling us some things that we need to become aware of. He says, this I know. Well, what do you know? What's the lesson? What do you know? He said this, when I cry out to God, when I call on God, when I cry out to God, here's a lesson that you can pick up and I can pick up. Maybe this is the one that you need to drop into your heart and take home with you. God, I'm going to cry out to you today. Maybe that's what you need to hook up with. Is there anything else that he picked up when we look at this psalm? Yeah, he said this one, God is for me. Yeah. That's powerful. Yeah. Say that, God is for me.
God is for me.
Wonder if we use sort of plaques. Okay, here it comes. This is the one that says, God is for me.
God is for me.
Boom. Boom.
God is for me.
Boom, 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 boom. You ready?
God is for me. God is for me.
Just testing. Okay, so God is for me, but there's something that they got hold of. God is for me. And David's gone from the place of living in a palace to the place of living in a cave. Palace living, cave dwelling. And here's the truth, that God starts a great work of preparation for you and I. Or for David, should I say, because it's his story. He's got a great calling on his life, and there's a great purpose coming on his life. And let me just read 1 Samuel, because it's really important for us to pick this up. What happens when he leaves the king's presence? Then he goes to the cave. 1 Samuel 22, verse 1-2. Here, starting to read. David departed from there, from Saul's place, okay? David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him, and he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. In the next chapter, that 400 goes to 600. What about that? Wow, incredible. 4 to 6. So we had 400 people who were all distressed, wound up, annoyed, and depressed. And then he got 200 more. I mean, that doesn't help you when you're living in a dark place in a wee cave. But anyway, that's what happens in his world. And you realize, oh, David, what's going on? You've got 600 cave dwellers. And it's in the spiritual caves of our lives that God says, I want to prepare you. I want to prepare you, and we miss this so often. I want to prepare you for the greatest work that I have set out for your life. It starts in a cave. It starts in a place of darkness. It starts in a place that is not comfortable, but God is working for you, and we work that out. We just need to learn to keep calling upon Him. Now, if you're in a cave, and the only thing that you do in your cave is you complain and you grumble to everyone but God, like to the walls, to the spiders, to the little snakes that are there, and the wee creepy crawlers. Can I tell you this, you know, and you just complain to them. Would it not be better to learn how to cry out to God and to say, God, I know that you're for me? Because the truth is, when you talk with Him, He's the only one that can sort your problem. He's the only one that actually can change something in your world. Nobody else can. It doesn't matter what wisdom they give you. It doesn't matter what trick they have up their sleeve. It doesn't matter what they went through before. The only one that can truly help you and I is Him. And that's why we need to go to Him to talk. And I want to suggest to you today that you try talking to Him. Oh, cave dweller. Anybody in a cave? Don't want to say now, do you? I do. I love caves. Why do you love caves? God's there. Is He really? Absolutely, God's in that cave. And I think if you don't stop for a minute in a dark area or a place that feels like a cave where you're trapped and think, God must be in this cave. He must be lurking here somewhere. You're going to miss a great opportunity to catch hold of the only one that can help you. You see, we're always trying to escape the cave rather than think, who's in this cave with me? And I would stop but for a moment and hold on to some of the promises of God. Hey, things might change quickly. Good things happen when we get honest and humble before God. Really, really good things happen. And a dark place has got the ability to shut you in, and if you just have the wisdom to cry out, if you have had the wisdom in your heart to think, God's still for me. I read it once in the Bible, that you'll sit down and think to yourself, I'm going to call to Him because He is wise. He is wise. Have you ever read in the Bible where it says, my ways are not your ways, saith the Lord, Isaiah 55. And so, my ways are not your ways, saith the Lord. Sorry, Isaiah 58. Somewhere about there, work it out. It's verse 11. 8 through the 11. My ways are not your ways, saith the Lord. And then He goes on and says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Anybody believe that? Yes. Put your hand up if you believe that. My thoughts aren't your thoughts. Why do we always think we're right? Have you noticed that? Like, we're always thinking, well, I got the way to walk this out. And we haven't talked with God, discussed with God. We just think that we have the way out. When He says, look, I don't think like that. I don't think like that. And we put things on God thinking that we really understand. God says, no, you're not getting this. I don't think like that. Start talking to Him because He does a great work in the cave. If you're in the cave. The cave problem must have been the most frustrating thing for David in his life. In hindsight, when you look back at it, it was probably the most fruitful time in his life also. Because the cave becomes a place where God shapes and forges away like hammering on an anvil on a piece of metal. In the cave of Adullam, David wrote some of the most moving psalms, well, particularly 3, Psalm 34, Psalm 142, Psalm 57. I'm going to go there and have a quick look at it and just read it. Psalm. Come on. Will you hear what it says? Psalm 59, verse 17. O my strength, I will sing praises to you, for you, O God, are my fortress, the God who shows me steadfast love. I mean, that's powerful when you just stop and just think about it. Wow, this God's going to show me steadfast love. Look at verse 3 of Psalm 57. Will you hear what it says? He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame them who trample on me. Selah, God will send out His steadfast love and His faithfulness. That's a lesson to learn in the cave. That's a lesson to learn in the cave. That God's going to send out His steadfast love. God's going to make a move toward you and a move toward me. When we're in this cave scenario, God says, I'm going to do that. It's another lesson that we need to understand. Let's look at verse 10. For your steadfast love is great to the heavens. Your faithfulness to the clouds. That's how vast it is. That's how vast it is. It's another lesson. He sends steadfast love and faithfulness. Then there's Jeremiah. Say Jeremiah. Let's leave David in his cave and let's go to Jeremiah. Well, maybe he was in a pit or in a cistern, but he was thrown down a hole that felt like a cave, but you get the idea. Jeremiah ends up in a cave where it's kind of like a cave of no hope. It's dark, there's probably no light, it's difficult. Maybe it's a cave of bitterness and tribulation when he writes Lamentations, it sounds kind of gruesome what's happening to him. There's no escape, it's like the chains are heavy on him. You ever felt that? You just can't break free from something? And there's these chains that are around him, and he's praying and he doesn't get an answer, and people are laughing at him. And he writes this in Lamentations, and this is a great insight. Really hear what he says. My soul, verse 17, Lamentations 3:17, my soul is bereft of peace. In other words, I've lost peace. You ever lost peace? Yep. He's saying, my soul is bereft of peace. But hear what he says, I have forgotten what happiness is. And I can tell I'm talking to people in this church. Look at the person beside, look at her kite. Oh my word. That's the Jeremiah kite. Sorry, that's a face. A kite's a face. On our neck of the wood. It says, my soul is bereft. I've lost something. I'm struggling here. Verse 18. So I say, my endurance has perished or lost also. So my hope has gone from the Lord. I mean, this is a desperate situation. Do you gather? Do you agree? Do you see it? He said, oh my word, I'm really broken here. I mean, I've no peace. And my endurance is gone. It's perished. So my hope from God, I can't even hope in God anymore. He's in an absolute turmoil with what's happening. My hope is gone. He's saying this. The feeling of hope is gone. Sometimes when you write in the Bible and it talks about hope, it means feeling. The feeling of hope is gone. That's what he said, of nothing or of nothing to grab hold of. Cable lost hope. There's nothing there. It's just a difficulty. It's an area. There's no hope. But there's hope in every cave, isn't that right? Oh, that's what we said. If I just drop down a couple of verses, go to verse 21, will you hear what it says? But I call this to mind, and therefore I have hope. Hold on a minute, you just tell me you were hopeless and everything's gone. What happened? What happened in his world that he was saying, I've no hope and now I've got hope? What did he find? What was in the cave? What was there? What was rescuing him? There must be something here that you and I can identify with, because one moment he said, I had no hope, and I wanted to, well, where did you get the hope from a verse later? How did you track that down? What changed in that cave? There's something in that cave that was lurking in the dark, in the recesses. His hope actually speaks at this point of saying, I'm just going to wait here because there must be God somewhere in this cave. That's the kind of feel. But we see that his hope returns. And it tells us here very, very clearly in the verse. It says, but this I call to mind. So the hope that he needed to find in that cave, it started with him calling something to mind. Because there was someone that lived in his mind. Yes. That he had shut out, pushed away, and said, there's no hope here. But he said all of a sudden, oh, hold on a minute, I'm going to call something to mind. I'm going to remember. I'm going to cause me to start thinking different and changing how I think. In other words, he's saying this, I took control of my mind in the cave. And what returned was hope. And I want you to stop for a minute and just think about this. He says, but this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Something that he needed to take hold of. And it helped him take a grip again on hope. So if you're a cave dweller and feel that you're hopeless, or know someone that's feeling hopeless in a situation, there's something maybe they need to call to mind. And you know, we're no longer separated from the presence of God as believers. If you've already decided to follow him, accepted Christ into your heart, you're not left on your own. You don't have to live in darkness. There's a way through. And he says, look, I call this to mind. I call to mind what was real. We're here in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6. I just want you to catch this because it might just help you. 2 Corinthians 4. I'm away the wrong way. 2 Corinthians 4 verse 6, will you hear what it says? For God, this is really for Jeremiah, but it was just written too late. thousands of years later. Wait to hear what it says. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure. You've got to work this out. This is for a cave dweller when we're writing this. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. And that's why so often when we're trying to sort our stuff out, it can never be sorted out, because God's saying, hey, listen, it's me that shines in darkness in your heart. It's me. When you get a revelation that I want to work and I'm the one that's going to rescue you. If you just but stop for a minute, there's glory that resides in a believer. And we've searched so many different places for help and hope, and it's not there other than in Him. In verse 22 of Lamentations 3, let's just read it. I'm going to read verse 21, then drop into 22. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. What's He called to mind? Say this with me. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. And He called that to mind in the middle of a cave when it was dark and it was wet and it was damp and there was no hope, and he felt, I have no feelings, there's nothing here. And He calls this to mind. I'm going to remember this right now. I'm going to just bring this into the fray of my battle and the difficulty that I'm facing today. I want to get this here because this is going to rescue me. The word that He's using here, and I want you to understand the steadfast love, is a word called hesed. Say hesed. Hesed. He's saying hesed never ceases. In other words, He said, I am not cut off from it, or it's not cut off from me. He's talking about the love of God. It's saying this. Hesed talks about the Lord's faithfulness. It talks about the Lord's mercy. It talks about compassion. Just that one simple word. And he says, it never ends. Hesed never ends. And that's a beautiful thing when you think about it. Because he's saying He is steadfast in love. His faithfulness never ceases. His loyalty is another word you explain hesed, never ceases. His mercy never ever ceases. His kindness never ever ever ceases. God doesn't know how not to be kind. Even when we come to Him, when we come running to Him, God says, I don't know how not to be kind towards you. And I know that's a mess in some people's minds. 245 times just in the Old Testament, this word hesed is written down in regard to the way I just said it. Loyalty, faithfulness, loving kindness, compassion. Can you get into a cave where all that's existing and can it be dark? It can't be. The problem is in our caves, we forget the word hesed. We forget about His loyal love. We forget about His compassion. It just slips our mind. And God wants it to burst forth. Why? Because it's His character. God has always loved you.
Yes, He has.
God has always loved you. Whether you were a saint or a sinner, God says, I love you. I can't stop it. It's in me. And He's constant with it. He never changes. He's going to love you today and He's going to love you tomorrow, because when He has this hesed love that He pours out, this loyal to His children. And when the moment you say, Lord, would you come into my life? He says, hey, do you know what? I just want to love on you. And if you can't hear the Lord calling you, if you can't hear Him speaking to you, well, you're in a dire situation. Because if He's not calling you, hey, we're lost. But if He's calling you, I want to encourage you to respond. Responding to Him is the utmost important thing in your world or in my world. Call this to mind. Hey, He's faithful and always loves. Do you know, as we're looking in the book of Exodus, I'm going to go there in a minute, and Moses was delivered the 10 Commandments. Do you remember the story? Somebody say yes. Thanks, Raymond. In Exodus 34, verse 6 and 7. Now remember, you know the story about the commandments where people, or God delivers the commandments and people just break the commandments right away and they get all smashed up, and then Moses is going back to get more, okay? Say yes to this, remember that. Yeah. Exodus 34, 6 and 7. Where do you hear how God describes Himself? the Lord passed before him, Moses, and proclaimed, the Lord, a God of merciful and gracious, slow to anger, what do you hear? And abounding, and overflowing, and just a rush out of him of steadfast love and faithfulness. I mean, that's powerful when the children of Israel are just going crazy and God says, hey, by the way, I'm the faithful one. You want to be my kid? I'm the faithful one to you. If you just hear the call from me to you, he says, I am the faithful one. I abound, overflowing. I've got it in abundance, this love that I can't stop. It wakes me in the morning. It watches me over. Sorry, it doesn't wake, but I'll watch you at night, and you wake in the morning. And he said, hey, I've got this abundance for you. Somebody let their face smile. Okay, good. But that's God describes himself. I'm abounding in Hesed. I'm abounding in Hesed. Say Hesed. So you know what it means, or I hope you know what it means, but God says, I'm abounding in it. He describes himself in terms of mercy and compassion and forgiveness and not forsaking anyone who says, I want to be your child. And when you come to him, he's just loyal. It just flows from him. And that's what Jeremiah's writing in Lamentations. He said, hey, you got to get hold of this God. He starts to say, I'm going to call to mind in this cave that's just not nice, his loyal love, the loyal love of Yahweh. The loyal love of Yahweh. It never ceases. And Jeremiah says, I'm going to appeal to the God who's loyal, abundant, and has seed for me in this cave. I'm going to believe it. I'm going to switch from where I'm at in this darkness and this madness and all this craziness and all this stupid talk that I have. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to scream out, Yahweh, you've got this Hesed love, and I'm here and I'm waiting on it. It's going to happen. Well, that's how I feel when I got up this morning. But surely that's got to be an answer. Instead, well, you know what? And my wee favourite song. Everybody hates me, nobody likes me, just 'cause I eat worms. Long, tall, skinny ones, short, fat, hairy ones. Listen to the little ones. Squirm. Pull all their heads off, suck all the juice out, pull the empty skins away. That's a good song, isn't it? Everybody hates me, nobody likes me, just because I eat worms. Anyway, God's not like that if you're a worm eater. He's really not. Don't know why I've done that, but I enjoyed it anyway. But hey, if you're in that cave, Jeremiah just looks at God and he says, I'm going to justify my hope that lives in me by remembering who you are. And so often we're trying to think about the trick or the way to get out, or to read 3 more verses of the Bible and then he'll have mercy. And God says, I'm abundant, guys. You can't work this out of me. It just pours out of me. It just pours out of me. Do you know, if you think of a big fat sponge full of water and reverently think that's the way the Lord is, and if you touch it, it just pours out of him. That's his love, that's his mercy, that's his goodness. Wow. In a cave. If you're in a cave, the Bible talks to us and says, look, focus on Hesed when we're thinking about praise. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the book of Psalms, I think. I maybe read this, maybe got excited ahead of myself. But Psalm 57, verse 19. No, it's not 57, verse 19. It must be 59, verse 19. No, it can't be 59, verse 19. I'll go to 17 instead. Oh, my strength, I will sing praises to you, for you, are God, are my fortress, the God who shows me steadfast love. In verse 7, as I read before, he says this. I have no idea what he says because I'm looking at the wrong place. I definitely don't know where they are. I don't know what I'm doing. Is it on the screen? Thank you. My heart is steadfast. There it is. Thank you, Keith. Oh God, my heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Go on to the next one. So I'm reading everything. For your steadfast love, verse 10, Psalm 57, verse 10, is great to the heavens, and your faithfulness to the clouds. That's great when you get mixed up, isn't it? Psalm 89, verse 1 and 2. Let's just read it. Read it together. You ready to go? Have you got it, Gwen? Put it up. You haven't got it? I'll read it. It's not the one I was looking at. 89. There we go. I will sing of the steadfast love of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make known your faithfulness to all the generations. For I said, steadfast love will be built up forever. In the heavens you will establish your what? Your faithfulness. Thank you for your help, because I need it this morning. Let's look at Psalm 118. We'll read 1 to 4. I read 1 to 4. That's thrown up, please, Grant. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is what? For his steadfast love endures for how long? Forever. Let Israel say, his steadfast love endures forever. Forever. Okay, let's say, yes, it endures forever. Let the house of JVC say, his steadfast love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, his steadfast love endures forever. Wow, you are brilliant. Thank you for your help. But it's so true. Psalm 23, what's it say there? Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Anybody want to guess what goodness and mercy actually means in that text? Hesed love. My faithfulness is abounding. It's going to follow you all the days of your life. And you know that's not when you get to heaven. Well, how do you work that out? Well, in a verse before, you were getting a big sandwich, a big sausage supper before in the presence of your enemies. And there's no enemies in heaven. This is for earth, guys. This is now. This is our time. Whatever it is that you're looking at and you're struggling with, or where you are. He's saying, I've got mercy. Surely goodness, mercy, hesed will follow me because he's my shepherd. Is he your shepherd today? I'm really asking you, is he your shepherd? I'm just asking that because you maybe quoted it, but I want to know, is he your shepherd? Is he yours? Is he the one you run to? Or have you got a list of stuff that you try to figure out before you talk with him? I'm just asking the question, is he really your shepherd? When something happens, who do you go to? And if it's not the shepherd, you've got this false shepherd somewhere. And he's looking and he's saying, hey, I want to be your shepherd. I mean, do you cry out for his protection? Do you look for, God, you're my source? Or is it the person that pays you the check at the end of the month? Or is it somehow something else that brings you security when he's saying, I'm your shepherd? I'm the one that shepherds you. Yes. I'm the one that really, really cares for you. There's no one that's going to care for you the way I care for you, because he says, I'm the shepherd of the sheep, and he wants to hug on you and love on you and be part of you and just caress you and pull you close to him. He's a protector. Lamentations, let's just go back to it in verse 23, says something really significant. Would you hear what it says? Talking about steadfast love that never ceases. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your every single morning. It's new. Hesed is new every morning. Hesed is new every morning. Hesed is new every single morning. Yes. It's new. It's fresh. It's not something that he had yesterday. It's brand new. Every morning, it's available every morning. Jeremiah wasn't saying, I'm not in pain in this pit. He wasn't, but he was assured that no matter what the spur he was in the morning, there was hesed love that was coming his way. Every day he would wake up. Every single day he would wake up. And somewhere in his mind he was going, I'm calling this to mind. His hesed is new, his faithfulness, his loyalty, his love is new every morning. And when I wake up, God's going to be there looking at me to fall in love with me all over again. Yes. Every day. Every day he wakes up and says, oh wow, there he is. There she is. There's the one that I love. There's the one that I'm falling in love with you again. Sorry, I don't mean that. He looked at me funny. But when the Lord, he just looks at you and he looks at me and says, I'm here to fall in love with you. So whatever time you opened your eyes this morning, the Lord was looking and saying, I am here with new love for you. I'm falling in love with you again today. And that's phenomenal. For every single morning, all the days of your life, God accumulates that and says, this is where I'm at with you. God's hesed is real. It is so real. And he says, therefore I have hope in him. But it's only mine if I appropriate it. Verse 24. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, the appropriation. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord's my portion. Lord, you're my portion. I'm going to hope in you. I'm going to hope in you. I'm going to hope in you and no one else. See, it's very, very personal. It's something that's meant to grab us. See, putting hope in him isn't passive. It's an action. It's something that we do. It's something that we activate ourselves into. Let me just read Psalm 33 and 18, last scripture. Right here it says, behold the eye of the Lord. Now hear this. The eye of the Lord. I want you to finish it. Behold the eye of the Lord is on those who... His eye is on those who hope in steadfast love. Hesed love. In other words, you're saying, God, I'm looking for your Hesed love. And God goes, I'm looking at you now. You got my attention. You've got my attention. That's what the psalmist is putting down. And you've got to stop for a minute and think, look, I know by faith we'll have to pray and believe. I get that. But you've got to be honest with yourself. And you've got to be honest with God. And some of us just need to stop kidding ourselves. If your living is full of sinning, you need to stop it and change direction, guys. Just need to change direction. Because God sends the Holy Ghost to deliver you and to empower you that you'll win in life continually. And that happens because Jesus satisfied the wrath of God when he hung on a cross. So that God never deals with you and I according to sin. But God says, I'm going to deal with you because you trusted in me. Because you heard my call from heaven. And you're trusting in me. I'm going to deal with you according to Hesed love. It's exactly what we need. See if you're full of guilt today. Throw yourself on his mercy. Learn in the cave that you're in of guilt. You see, God's at work in people today, here, right now, in this cave. You mightn't see him. Some people mightn't even understand him. You mightn't understand what he's doing. Maybe you can't figure out why you're feeling lonely. But in your loneliness, in your darkest hour, God says, I'm with you. I'm with you. And I'm getting you ready for some purposes in your life. And maybe that's just too far for you to grasp. Let me just show this illustration as the worship team are coming up. If you doubt that the Lord works in caves, remember this. There's an empty cave on the outskirts of Jerusalem. And for 3 days it held a body that had been crucified. God does his best work in caves. And that day he done a resurrection. And because the man Christ Jesus was resurrected, you and I can be resurrected. I hope that'll change your mind if nothing else changes your mind. About caves and about Hesed, about his love. Stand your feet. He's steadfast, he's faithful, he's loyal, he's merciful, he's kind. I'm talking about the love of God. I'm talking about the...